What is going on, guys? So today I'm making a different type of video. It is kind of anime related. It's not directly related to One Piece, although it is very much so. You could kind of take everything I'm saying and just think I'm talking about One Piece. That'd be fine. Or you could talk about any other like shonen series that has like a power system of some sort where there's a lot of fighting. That would pretty much work for this. So basically, what I'm going to be talking about is how at least and I think generally speaking, you are supposed to calculate power levels in a shonen series, or even something else, even like I don't know, Marvel or DC or something. I mean, it's really all the same thing at the end of the day. It's not like there's some specific system you're supposed to use. It's just I've come up with a way that I think makes the most sense. Like this is all the things you can factor in when you're calculating something like this. So what I'm saying doesn't really make sense until I actually start talking about it. So let me just get into it. So there's three main categories that determine somebody's power levels in a series. Of course, there's like an actual number that only an author would know, and then there's a way that we can get somewhere near it based on information that we've been presented. Of course, there's some series like Seven Deadly Sins that give you an actual power level. That's pretty nice. Although at the same time, in series like Seven Deadly Sins, those seem to not even be accurate anyway. There's characters who have significantly lower levels defeating characters with ease or something that have significantly higher levels, but that's just so beyond the point right now. But so the three main categories that I think there are is one would be power scaling, two would be feats, and three, see how I did that? I go from here to here? Yeah. That would be Portrayal. I think those are the three main categories. There's maybe some other small things, but I think basically at the end of the day, these are the three things you're mainly going to be using. So I'm just going to break down how I think those work exactly, like what would be categorized into those specifically and how they help us in different ways. So first we have power scaling, right? A lot of people think that power scaling is just the entire thing, like that's the term that you use for the whole calculation overall, but that's not really true. What power scaling really is like, so for example, let's say we have guy A. Guy A beats guy B, and guy B beats, I think I said eat two times, so let's start over. Let's say we have guy A beats guy B, and guy B beats guy C. Because of that, it's pretty safe to assume that guy A would beat guy C, right? Because if guy B can beat C and A beat B, then A should, by all accounts, be able to beat C. And that's generally going to be true. Most of the time, that's a fair assumption. There's no reason to think otherwise. Now, of course, there are weaknesses to all of these, and that's why we can't just take power scaling into account, because there are times that would not be true. For example, the biggest weakness really is when there is a counter. That's the real time that that's not going to work. If guy A countered B, and then B beats C, that doesn't necessarily mean that A will be able to beat C, because A had an inherent advantage against B, right? So in situations like that, power scaling isn't going to be that helpful. Of course, it does give us some kind of area that someone's at, right? A counter is generally not going to be so extreme that it lets them defeat somebody completely out of their leagues. This is very clear in One Piece, in my opinion. But that is very important, something you need to take into account. For example, in One Piece, a situation where I've seen something like this happen is Luffy was not able to really defeat Cracker, most certainly not by himself. And even then, with help, he barely was able to pull it off. And it was an enormous amount of help. It basically took Cracker's massive counter he had against Luffy and basically nullified it. I mean, he still had the super overpowered Devil Fruit, but Luffy's particular combat style was originally countered by Cracker's ability, and then Nami was able to basically nullify that. So I don't think Cracker would really beat Luffy in a fight if neither of them used their Devil Fruits, right? I think that if it came down to hockey and whatnot, Luffy would probably win. But because Cracker had that counter, he was able to have the upper hand. On the other hand, as I've explained in multiple videos, despite what a lot of people seem to think I'm saying, believe that Luffy is more powerful than Zorro, and I think that's pretty reasonable. I think most people will agree with me on that one. However, I think Zorro would make pretty quick work of Cracker, and by make pretty quick work of, that's kind of an exaggeration, but I don't think he would really ever be losing. I think he counters Cracker pretty well, considering we go from Luffy using his blunt attacks, which don't really work too well against Cracker's Biscuit soldiers, to Zorro using his slashing attacks. The same reason that I think Dofi would also have an easier time against Cracker. I think both of them would clearly win against him. So that's a perfect example of power scaling not really going too well. We have Luffy, who's probably the strongest, followed by, I would say, Zorro and then Cracker. However, Luffy would actually lose to Cracker, who would lose to Zorro, right? So it's a little bit weird of a situation. And Zorro would lose to Luffy. So that's an example of why power scaling is not the only thing you can rely on, and there's situations where sometimes you have to consider different factors. So that's power scaling, basically. Then we have feats of strength, whatever you want to call them. These are pretty useful because they are based on things that actually happen, not hypothetical situations. Basically, I mean, if you don't even know what I'm talking about, a feat is when a character actually does something. So, for example, when Zorro defeats Pika, we know that he is at least Pika level. Basically, again, power scaling kind of comes into there because, well, maybe Zorro countered him. He didn't counter him at all. If anything, it was the complete opposite. But that's basically what a feat is. So based on something someone's actually done, we can say, okay, well, if this is something they can do, so we can keep that in mind, and we can assume that they can do anything less than that, which is generally fair. Like, so for example, if somebody, I don't know, blows up a mountain with an ability or some sort, we can assume, based on that they will be able to blow up a building, because a building is smaller and easier to blow up. And there's really no reason to think that that wouldn't be the case unless we're talking like One Piece and somebody had the mountain fruit, and that's the only reason they were able to blow up a mountain. I don't even know what a mountain fruit would do, but again, like, it's pretty straightforward. Once somebody has accomplished something, you can assume that they can always do something less. Of course, unless it's a weird specific situation. So that's basically how feats work. Now, the weakness to them, in my opinion, is that with feats, it's based on things that actually happened, meaning that sometimes something won't happen, and people will have this weird way of looking at it as like, well, this didn't happen, so that means this character is not capable of doing it. Zorro is basically the best example I've seen in One Piece, in my opinion, of somebody who's lacking feats, but I think is still extremely powerful anyway. I basically make a lot of assumptions about his strength, despite him lacking a lot of feats. Now, that's the problem with feats in general, right? People think, oh, well, Zorro hasn't really accomplished anything. But at the same time, he hasn't really been offered the opportunity. It's not like he's lost a single fight since the New World Star. I mean, he hasn't lost a fight since Mihawk, right? So it's not like he's lost anything. It's just he hasn't been given the opportunities to show his abilities. And people think, oh, well, he hasn't shown his abilities, so he's not capable of doing so. And that's the problem with feats. People seem to think that if they don't happen, then they wouldn't be able to happen, which is not how it works. Now, sometimes a lot of the time there's situations when someone hasn't done something that does mean that they are not capable of doing it. For example, Luffy cannot defeat a Yonko right now. How do I know this? Because he hasn't, and he has attempted to fight a Yonko, and it didn't work. Obviously, it was a blowout, right? But you have to figure out those kind of situations. Which ones are they actually capable of accomplishing if they have not done so already? So that's the problem and the good parts about feats. And the last one, the one that I think is severely underrated and needs to be treated pretty equally with its other categories, right? And some people I don't even think use this at all, is Portrayal, right? The problem with Portrayal is it's kind of subjective, right? There's no real way to look at it. It's not like the other two where one of them actually happened and the one you can look at what other people have actually done in terms of fights and whatnot and figure out things based on that. You kind of have to just like interpret the story, right? And everyone's going to do that a little bit differently. It's hard to say exactly how strong someone is based solely on this because it is so subjective by nature. But you kind of have to consider it a lot of the time. For example, the way Kaido is being portrayed as the strongest character in the series, right? We even have the narrator basically saying, he is actually saying he is the strongest character living, so in the series currently. And similarly, most people seem to think that Shanks is the strongest in the series. And I think that's pretty fair. I mean, the thing is, at least up until recently anyway, he has been portrayed as one of the strongest characters in the series. His almost entire reasoning behind people thinking he is so strong is portrayal. He doesn't have any feats besides becoming a Yonko, which obviously is huge. Okay, obviously that's huge. But we haven't actually seen him do anything. We don't know who he can defeat, so power scaling's out the window. It's all been based on portrayal. And people don't seem to realize that and how important it really is. And it's very fair to say, yeah, he could very well be the strongest character in the series. And it's almost completely based on portrayal. Another great example of this, in my opinion, in One Piece is X Drake, right? Not just does he have the number 10, which is immediately below the Jack and the Queen and King, but he also is a member of Kaido's elite squad of headliners, right? He's a member of this squad, despite Hawkins and Apu not being. And again, I've been saying I think X-Drake is one of the strongest supernovas since before we found out he was a part of this squad. I mean, we also had back in Sabaody when he was able to take on pacifistas when none of the other supernovas were able to do so. So, yeah. I think that he's always been portrayed as one of the stronger supernovas, and there's more and more evidence making it seem like that is most likely the case. So that's basically portrayal for you. I mean, it's not too complicated, right? What other characters talk about when they're talking about this character, right? The way that they react to that person's presence, the way that character fits into the story, how important they are, like what kind of dynamic they're going to play. Like, you can kind of tell that Kid and Law they're going to be some of the stronger supernovas based on the shit that happened to Sabaody when there was kind of some like 3-man rivalry that was built up between the two of them. That wasn't a feat. That most certainly wasn't power scaling. That was portrayal. So I think that portrayal is very underrated and it needs to be taken into consideration a lot more. I think that all three of these are really pretty equal in terms of how important that they are. But you need to take all of them together when looking at a character and be like, okay, well, you know, there's this, but there's also this and that. And you have to really take a look at all of it and see where this character fits based on all of them. Zorro, right? Okay, perfect example. He's completely lacking feats. However, and we haven't really gotten to see much power scaling because of that, but his portrayal has been absolutely absurd for the entire series. He's clearly being built up to be the next Rayleigh, who is one of the strongest characters we've ever seen. He is going to surpass Mihawk, who is very possibly stronger than Shanks. I mean, guys, he's all portrayal, the same way that Shanks is, and people love saying the Shanks is the strongest in the series, but so many people don't like to hear that Zorro is so strong. And that's really the thing that actually inspired me to make this video. What gave me the idea was all these people just losing their minds over my Zorro video that got a lot of views a few weeks ago, and calling me a Zorro tard, right? I mean, okay, I don't care. Whatever, that's fine. But I just realized that maybe it would be, you know, a good idea to make a video explaining how I come up with this shit. So this is pretty much the basics. I don't know. I think that this is generally how most people do this, even if they don't know that they're doing it consciously, right? At the end of the day, this is basically what you're looking at. You might not have names like power scaling, feats, portrayal for what's going on in your head, but I think basically this is what everyone's doing. So maybe I made something here, right? I don't know. Maybe this is these are words that people are going to start using now. I think that would be cool. So, you know, if you like this, share the video or whatever. That would be really fun. You know, that's basically it. So if you guys did enjoy the video, remember to get a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a comment letting me know what you thought. Maybe you have some other types of titles for these different categories and whatnot. Maybe you have a whole new category that you think I completely overlooked. Maybe I did, honestly. But I don't know. I think this pretty much covers everything. So yeah, make sure to leave a comment. I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your day. Hope you're enjoying your week, and I will talk to you guys soon.